Another interesting one for this week came in. Borderlands developer
Mm.
Gearbox reportedly up for sale. This is west of the Input IGN. Gearbox, the US game company behind the Borderlands series, is reportedly up for sale. Reuters reports Gearbox parent company Embracer is weighing up its options, one of which is a sale. Apparently, Embracer has received interest from a number of third parties. Neither Embracer nor Gearbox have issued comment. Embattled Embracer is currently undergoing a significant restructuring that has already seen the closure of Volition, which I don't think we talked about last week. The game developer
RIP
behind
Saints
Saints
Row.
Row that Terry in the chat is now playing and Cayman has a lot of love for. That studio was just shut down last week, which is really sad. The long-running, studio behind the Saints Row series. Earlier this year, Embracer announced it would start to close studios and cancel games as a $2 billion deal, reportedly with Saudi government-funded company Savvy Games Group, fell through at the last moment. Embracer Group has been on an acquisition spree over the past few years. They've been on this show many times talking about acquisitions, including snapping up Tomb Raider developer Crystal Dynamics and Gearbox, among many, many others. The February 2021 deal to acquire Gearbox valued the company at up to $1.4 billion. And then the Borderlands spinoff, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and New Tales from the Borderlands, both came out last year, bringing in revenue for Gearbox. And then it goes on to do other stats. And there's a movie and all these things. But we bring this today to discuss, to ask the question, who do we think would be buying? Because, we've talked so much about Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard and Sony buying Bethesda, or sorry, not Bethesda, Bungie, and Xbox buying Bethesda. And it seems to be who can acquire who these days.
Mm.
So the question is, do we think someone does buy Gearbox, or do we think Gearbox kind of buys themselves and goes independent again? What do you think?
So I have a couple theories on this, Patrick. So Microsoft buying Activision, I don't think they're in a place right now where they can feasibly pull off buying another company. Gearbox,
Yeah, I don't
don't
think
get me
so.
wrong, much, much smaller scale, but we're still talking that's going to be $1 billion, $2 billion deal, right? Maybe less actually, because Embracer's in dire need of cash. So they might get a deal out of it and get it less than a bill, maybe less than a bill or around a bill.
Yeah.
So it is in realm of possibility, but I put Xbox, Microsoft, I put them at the very back of the list. I don't think that that's something for them, right? Sony, I also put at the very back of the list. I don't think that this is a studio, even though they have a lot of different titles under their pedigree and scope, and they have a lot of IP. I don't think Sony needs to buy them. I think one part of me goes, maybe Sony's in. I think Xbox is completely removed. I think Sony's in the race, but I don't think it's necessary. The only reason I say that they're in the race is because Sony has had previously a lot of support with Gearbox doing Gearbox related stuff.
Yeah.
So they've been a big part. Borderlands 3 historically was a big deal on PlayStation 4 when it first dropped, and they did like a big thing. It was part of like PlayStation's, what was it, when PlayStation offered like a chunk of a library when you got a PlayStation 5.
The PlayStation Plus collection.
Yeah. So the Borderlands, all of the Borderlands games were part of that. So Sony's very much in the mix, but I don't think Sony needs them or really needs to do anything there. So I don't think Sony, I'll put them at the bottom of the list too. There's 4 situations that I see. The first, I think 2K buys Gearbox. That's my number one is Gearbox gets bought by 2K. Why? 2K historically has published all of Gearbox or all of the Borderlands titles. This makes smart move for 2K. And right now, 2K needs some fucking love because NBA 2K is getting absolutely trashed on Steam for a horrible PC port.
Yeah, the second worst reviewed game on Steam in Steam history, I think.
So they're already there. Obviously, they have Rockstar and they're kind of milking the cash cow. They've got the capital. They can do it. I think they need some extra little pump there. I think Borderlands can help give them that. But the other studio I think that might actually acquire them is EA.
Sure.
EA is in dire need of diversity in their portfolio. They've been very reliant on just sports heavy titles the last couple of years. They will drop Star Wars games every once in a while, and they've got that new game, Immortals of Avium or whatever, that like kind of came and as soon as it showed up, it was completely gone. I don't even think we even talked about it.
I completely forgot that that came out already.
Dead Space. So they've got capital as well, but they need to diversify their portfolio, especially in the next few years. I think a Borderlands buy works for them. The second is Embracer just eats it and is like, no, we're not going to get any good deals on this. We're going to hold them. And then the last is obviously, I think of the four main ones, the last one for me is Gearbox figures out a way to get a deal where they can get themselves out of Embracer Group. I think because of how much they were bought for, I think Embracer probably has a higher price tag on their head if Gearbox wants to go independent. I don't know if your Gearbox can potentially actually do that. And so I don't
Yeah,
think independency is something that could happen, but it is in the running in the top four. I still think 2K is number one for me right now.
yeah, I at first I was thinking independent made sense because Remedy did it way years ago
Bungie.
from Microsoft. Bungie's done it, like, but I don't know. It was so recent that they sold to Embracer Group that tells me they sold for a reason, right? Whether it's they didn't want to be the ones managing all the big moves stuff anymore, maybe they needed the cash. So I feel like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was successful. Tales from the Borderlands wasn't. I just don't know that they would have the money to do that themselves. Or,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone to a degree would like to be the ones in charge of their own ideas, but I would also be willing to bet that like someone fucking insane like Randy Pitchford at the top of the Gearbox ladder probably negotiates a lot of creative control with what they do anyway, because he's a fucking narcissist. He's not going to want anyone telling him what to do. I think EA makes a lot of sense. I think 2K makes a lot of sense. I think PlayStation makes a little more sense than you do, only because I could see as like a response to Xbox with all the Activision stuff, wanting to be able to say Borderlands is now exclusive to PlayStation. Jim Ryan would fucking cream his leathers to be able to say that.
Yeah. But I think so. My one hesitation with that, I don't disagree, but all of the acquisitions that Sony has made over the last couple of years have all been strategic
for
buyout.
sure. For sure.
I think the only one that to me wasn't like a very strategic buyout was Insomniac. It was more of like a come home kind of
Right. You've
situation. Like,
kind of already been a PlayStation
yeah,
studio. Might as well
you've
just put it
been
into
here forever. Just now come into the fold. We'll give you some extra cash and give you some breathing room. But everything else, like Bungie's acquisition, was mainly so that they could get some expertise on like games as a service, large
right.
scope, scale kind of stuff. They've bought out like VR teams, which makes sense for what Sony's doing with VR. They've bought and they're buying out a lot of technology teams. They're trying to get farther into cloud gaming. They're trying to get
Yeah.
farther into certain aspects of the tech side, which I think Sony right now realizes we don't have the capital to fight Microsoft on the same scale that Microsoft is. Our best bet is to potentially try to fight Nintendo and try to edge them out and try to take away some of that. And I think that's where they're heading. But like you said, Gearbox could be one of those where it just helps bolster the lineup a little bit more to be like, if you want these games, come play them here first. Or
because like my other thinking too on it is, well, if they spent all that money on Bungie for the games as a service model, and they've said like over the next year or two they're releasing like 8 or 9 games as a service games, and most of those, if not all of those, are going to be shooting based.
Mm-hmm.
What if Borderlands or Gearbox is definitely working on the next Borderlands in some capacity, or the next Tiny Tina's, whatever. Yeah. All these other ones that they're making right now are for the most part new IP, or new IP to a certain extent. Like, I mean, Helldivers is coming back, but it's coming back in a completely new way. So like it kind of in a way feels like a new IP. Borderlands, a very successful, long-running, legacy-driven IP, maybe bringing in something like that will be a almost certain success the next game that they release might be something to kind of hopefully kind of counteract the risk on new IP. But I hear you though. I definitely I wouldn't put them as my number one choice of who I think would do it, but I do think that it's
Well, I
definitely
do.
within a realm of possibility.
Yeah, and I do like the idea that Sony looks at this as like, hey, we can start to kind of take another piece of the market because Sony's been so forward with like narrative driven single player games, adding another mix into the fold of like, hey, do you want a game that you can another couch co-op game that's a little bit more silly? It's not a games as a service, but you can have co-op and you can have so maybe. I mean,
Yeah,
could potentially be. I would say that if I had to hedge my bets, less than 10% odds.
sure,
I wouldn't take it to Vegas.
sure. Don't take much to Vegas
Hold
these
on, wait,
days.
should we do that? Should we do like video game Vegas odds things?
I mean, we could. We certainly could. John in the chat. How you doing, John? Long time no chat. I miss you. I miss you, pal. Well, Cayman, that's the end of our show now. There was, we were going to talk about Assassin's Creed Mirage and Resident Evil games coming to iPhone 15 and what that might mean. But, that's most of the story right there. And
Oh, come on, man. The ray tracing on an iPhone. What the fuck does that
Sure.
even mean?
Sure. But I do want to quickly kind of send us home with just a couple quick hits for the game release calendar. Mortal Kombat 1 coming out next week. They confirmed Jean-Claude Van Damme skin coming to the game.
Took 30 years.
Took 30 years, but it's happening. And then also something that I meant to mention last week and I completely forgot. Cayman, did you know that there's a new Rugrats game coming to NES?
Oh, you're fucking kidding.
I'm not kidding you. It's also coming to modern consoles too, but it's a game called Rugrats Adventures in Gameland. It's being released on the NES, PC, Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox, I believe.
Is it through
and essentially
limited run games?
It's limited run games is helping publish.
Nice.
They're publishing the physical version of it, but essentially it's going to be like the Halo Master Chief Collection, where on modern consoles, you press a button and it'll either look like the NES version or like a modern version.
So
and then
cool.
on NES, if you buy the cart, it'll work and it'll just be the NES version of the game. But it's like an old school, like 2D platformer.
Yeah, limited run games, they do stuff like this a lot. There's been a few announcements of some remasters coming out lately that have been wild. Games that I never thought would see the light of day again are getting remasters through limited run games. So shout out to them. That's fucking awesome.
For sure. But yeah, this article that I'm pulling from doesn't have a specific date, but I believe it's 2024, early 2024, I think is what I had heard originally, is when this new Rugrats game is coming. And you better fucking believe it. I got an NES right there. I'm going to try to get this cart and see if I can get it running, as long as it's not too fucking expensive. But I thought that was really cool that there's a new one, that it's a Rugrats, and two, that it's actually being released on NES. Limited run games is really cool. You should go support them if you like that shit. And that's our show. John, you got here right at the perfect time, right when the show came to an end. But as John mentions in the chat, he got the form link for the top 100. Make sure you submit your top 15 for the top 100. That's going to launch on October 3rd or whenever that episode runs that week. Episode 96 is going to be when we start the top 100. We're going to do a 5-episode run, 20 games an episode. You guys are creating the top 100 by submitting your top 15 games. So make sure, whether it's in the description of this episode, on your podcast service, or on YouTube if you're watching it there, or head over our socials in our bio, link tree, all that shit. The link's going to be there as well.
Like I said before, if you want to support Gearbox by helping Bulletstorm become #1 game of all time,
shut the
you know how to do it here.
Cayman, where can they follow you at home if they want to?
I refuse to call it X. You can follow me on Twitter at the Dumpster Boy. Save Trash Cinema's coming back. We've got some stuff in the works right now for a series with my condition with my back. It's made things a lot harder, but I've got some people that are going to be helping me take some of the workload off of my shoulders. But Save Trash Cinema is coming back soon. And I will hold the details for now, but let's just put it this way. we're going to be doing a series coming up, and it's going to be real fun, and it's going to be from an 80s movie that has a lot of sequels. So it'll get my
this is
feet
news
wet
to me.
again. It'll get my feet wet again.
Yeah, you better. At Patrick Swag for me, at Spot Games FOD, Spot Games Pod for the pod on Twitter, Spotlight Games Pod on Instagram, TikTok, fucking Threads, even though I literally never use it. And most importantly, YouTube and Twitch, Spotlight Games Pod. Make sure to follow us there. We love you. We thank you. Go play some video games. Go pre-order fucking Rugrats on the NES.
Yep.
Yep.